The girl from Venus. What happened to your face? That was the first thing Zahira said to me when I met her on the island. Are you okay? That black eye looks nasty. Dad had just hit me after I yelled at him for kicking Luna. I fell on my bike. I lied. It's nothing to worry about. We talked a little bit about Luna. Zahira liked her, patted her on the head with a huge smile on her face, and asked which breed she was. She's a corgi, I said. It was my mom's, but she died so. Zahira said she was sorry, and I lied again and said it was okay. A gunshot echoed across the island. What's that sound? Zahira asked. It's scaring the birds. It's my dad, I said. He's just practicing his aim. This was the third time I ran from the house since my dad brought me to Brick Island, where my late mom's summer house was located. My heart was beating fast from the adrenaline pumping through my veins, but seeing Zahira's innocent expression on her face helped me relax in some sense, helped me feel more like I pretended to feel. I'm John, by the way, I said, smiling for the first time since forever. She told me her name. I thought it was unusual. She looked a bit different too, at least to my young mind, with her dusky skin and green sequin dress. Being too young to understand in what way it could be considered rude, it inspired me to ask where she was from. I'm from Venus, she said, laughing when she saw the look of disbelief on my face. But right now, I'm staying in one of the houses on this island. I saw a documentary about Venus, I said. It's too hot for people to live there. That's not true, she said, but it doesn't matter. I don't expect you to believe me. She was a weirdo, I thought, but I was still happy to have found someone closer to my age on the island. Usually, it was just occupied by retired couples and old fishermen. Zahira was only a couple of years older than me, perhaps 16. We continued down to the water. I asked if she liked video games. She loved them, but I had never heard of the ones she was talking about. At this point, I had almost forgotten about my dad. I finally felt normal, which was anything but normal. Then I heard the four-wheeler coming down the dirt road. Luna barked, knowing full well what it meant, and I immediately tensed up. Dad stopped the vehicle and walked towards us. When he saw that I wasn't alone, he changed his demeanor and added a smile. There you are, buddy, he said with the kind of voice he only used when we weren't alone. It's time to come home and eat some dinner. I'm sure Luna is hungry as well. There was nowhere to run. We were on an island after all. Okay, I said, avoiding meeting his eyes. Then I turned to Zahira. I have to go. It was nice meeting you. She stayed at the water, watching me as my dad drove back to the house. The sun was still shining, making the leaves on the oaks and maple trees glimmer like emeralds. But it was still just as if a giant shadow had fallen upon me. I held Luna in my arms, wetting her fur with my tears, while the bumpy road made it look like the entire world was shaking. But Zahira stood firm, suspended in a sunbeam. I knew what was coming. I let go of Luna outside the house, fearing Dad would do something to her as well. He sat me down on the bed and put his large hand on my thigh. You and I are going to have a little chat, he said with hateful rage in his eyes. Who was that girl? Luna was barking outside, wanting me to come outside. That fucking dog, my dad exclaimed. It will be the death of me, I swear to God. He took a deep breath. Who was that girl you were with? Don't you fucking dare say I don't know. You know I hate that answer. Who was that girl? Don't make me ask again, okay? His grip on my thigh tightened. I could see his patience wither away from his stern face. I wanted to cry, but I held back my tears. It would just make him angrier if he saw me cry. I met her by accident. We just talked. Must have been the new neighbor's kid, my dad interrupted, talking to himself. You didn't tell her about the black eye, Did you? Because you know what would happen if you did, right? He didn't care for my answer. I would take your beloved little Luna to the shed. He didn't need to say more than that. I knew he was serious. Just 1 year earlier, he had flushed my goldfish after I didn't finish all the food on the plate. I didn't. His grip tightened even more, making it hurt. I promise, I added with a lump in my throat, but to no avail. He noticed that I was choking up, like a predator focusing on a weakest prey in the herd, and the grip got tighter. You're never going to talk to her again. Do you understand me? My lower lip stopped trembling and my heart skipped a beat. Yes, I said. But it was too late. It only took a second, but it was enough for him to spot my hesitation, and the grip tightened even more. The warmth from my tears running down my face spread through my body, as if they tried to comfort me with their embrace. Are you going to talk to that girl again? My dad asked. No, I said, but his grip just kept growing stronger. I squirmed out of pain. He raised his voice. Are you going to talk to that girl again or not? No, I promise, I cried. I won't. That's good, he finally said, because if you do, you're eating dog stew for dinner. And just like that, he released his grip and left the room. I crawled up in the corner of the bed, crying my eyes out into my feather pillow. The next day, I saw that I had gotten a large bruise on my leg, and the only thing I thought was how bad it was that he didn't hurt me higher up, since this meant I couldn't wear shorts outside anymore. I saw Zahira again a few days later while walking Luna. She was still wearing the same clothes as before. I was afraid to approach her again, thinking about my dad's threats. It wasn't worth another beating, I thought, and was just about to turn around when Luna, unaware of the danger, began walking down the slope while wagging her tail. I whispered for her to stop, but she didn't listen, and I followed her with my heart in my throat. Zahira was sitting on a stump next to an anthill. I could hear her speak, almost in a whisper, but there was no one else there. She was caught by surprise when she saw me, as if I startled her. But as soon as she realized it was me, she smiled the kind of smile that my mom used to give me before she died. It made me feel warm inside, but also somehow sad, just because I knew what a rarity it was. Hey, she said. Who were you talking to? I asked, looking at an ant climbing up on my sneaker. Lo, she said. It's my... She interrupted herself. It doesn't matter. No one else can see him anyway. I only talk to him when I'm lonely. He's not much of a friend. I used to do that a lot, I said. When my mom died, I had this imaginary friend, but I stopped talking to him when I was 8. Now I'm 11, so I don't know. I guess I won't be able to talk to Lolo for much longer, she said. He's dying. I thought it was strange that she still had an imaginary friend since she was a bit older than me even. And I certainly didn't get how an imaginary friend could be dying, but I didn't mind. I already knew she was a bit of a weirdo. The ants fascinate me, she said, seemingly trying to change the subject. I've been looking at them all day. They're almost like people, but more organized. I picked up a stick and poked at the nest, agitating the ants. We are like giants to them, I said. Do you think they're afraid of us? Of course, she said, as she reached down and removed some ants from Luna's fur. But we are just like them, and giants are looking down at us as well. I've seen them. You're weird, I said with a smile. Is that bad? She asked. No, I said. I think you're cool. Oh, that's good, she said, but still looking a bit unsure. Let's take a walk. I want to show you something. I need to get back to the house, I said. I was just supposed to take Luna for a short walk and my dad. I looked down at my shoes again. I don't want him to get worried. Your dad isn't nice, is he? She asked. He's the reason you look so sad, isn't he? I felt my heartbeat in my throat. She was so close to figuring it all out, my biggest secret, and a voice inside of me screamed at me to open up and tell her everything. And the closer I got to that decision, the faster my pulse beat. But in the end, I just said, "He's okay." I could see that she didn't believe me, but she didn't push it. "Let's meet up later," she said. "I'll be at the pier." Dad was watching horse racing from his armchair, clutching the ticket with his fat hand. There were several beer cans on the floor next to him. "Where have you been?" he asked. "You're late." I wasn't, but it didn't matter. "I should beat you for that," he mumbled. "Fetch me another beer." His breath already reeked of alcohol. I went to the kitchen, but I couldn't find any more beers in the refrigerator. I panicked, knowing too well what would happen if I returned empty-handed. I looked through all the kitchen cabinets and every shelf in the pantry, feeling my skin tingle out of anxiety. "Where the fuck is my beer?" I heard my dad yell from the living room. "The next race is about to start. I swear to God if you..." Just as he said that, I found another pack of beers under the sink. I breathed a sign of relief, opened it up, and grabbed one of the bottles. "Why the fuck did you bring me one of the new bottles?" my dad yelled when I gave it to him. "Didn't you see the fucking can next to the milk?" My lower lip trembled. I cursed myself for having missed it. "Just like your fucking mother," he said. I froze as my heart swelled with a futile hatred. That was the one thing I couldn't get used to, the one thing I could never accept. When he talked about Mom, "Well, don't just stand there, you worthless piece of shit." He didn't notice the horses racing down the track. "Now you have to go bring me the fucking bottle opener." He smiled at me ironically. "Go." I ran to the kitchen again, scrambled through the drawers like a wild animal trying to find the bottle opener. And when I finally did, my dad yelled again. Oh, for crying out loud. I was shaking when I handed him the opener. He was furious, staring at the TV. "You little piece of shit," he said as he opened the bottle. "Look what you did. Look what you fucking did." I knew what he meant. It wasn't the first time he accused me of it. Somehow, it was my fault that his horse hadn't won. Worthless, just like your mother. He got up, pushed me out of his way, and kicked Luna hard in her belly. I ran up to her and held her in my arms, trying to comfort her. Dad stopped when he saw it. He couldn't tolerate it. Seeing any form of affection, any form of sentimentality, it made him cringe, as if he was watching someone make a complete fool of themselves. "Please, don't hurt," I said. He took a giant leap towards me. I hunched over Luna, protecting her with my own body. Dad smacked me 5 times with his huge open palm. It landed on the top of my head, my neck, my shoulder, and left new bruises on my body. After that, he simply walked out of the room with not so much as a word. And I thought about what Zahira had told me. Giants are looking down at us as well. She was laying on her back on the pyre, looking up at the sky. Luna ran up to her, licking her face. Zahira laughed and sat up with a smile. But as soon as she saw my face, she looked concerned and perhaps a little bit upset. "Let me guess," she said. "You fell on your bike again." I didn't respond. "It's not your fault," she said. "You know that, right?" "Dad is asleep now," I said. "He won't wake up in a while." "Sit down," she said. I sat down next to her, listening to the water lap against the wooden beams beneath us. "Look there," she said and pointed at a yellow, shimmering dot in the evening sky. "That's where I'm from. Can you imagine? It looks so tiny from here." I wanted to impress her and repeated what they had said in the documentary. They thought it was a star at first, before they figured out it was a planet. "You were right before," she said and looked into the water. "But it wasn't always too hot there." She looked at me with dreamy and yet somehow sad eyes. "It used to be green, filled with lush forest and dense jungles. and there were all kinds of animals walking on its continents and swimming in its oceans. And the sight of its mysterious green haze in the earth sky inspired man to progress and to eventually venture out into space to explore. "Is this a story?" I asked. She looked at me smiling. "You don't believe me?" "It's still a nice story," I said. "In the documentary I watched, they said there could have been water on Venus millions of years ago, just like on Mars. But then something happened that made it too hot and all the water disappeared, and now it's dead." "I know what happened," she said. "You won't believe me. But, well, it's really complicated. From my perspective, the British Empire colonized Venus at the end of the 18th century and—" "That's impossible," I interrupted. "We didn't even have airplanes back then." "Really?" she said, looking genuinely surprised. "Well, I told you it was complicated. From my perspective, things happened much faster than it seems to have happened from your perspective. From what I can remember from school, we flew the first airplane in the year 1603 or something like that. You have a really active imagination," I said as kindly as I could. "Don't you want me to continue?" she asked. I know how ridiculous it must sound. "I didn't mean it like that," I said. "I want to hear your story." And I really did. It helped me forget about my own reality, at least for a moment. "Okay, well," she said, "Venus declared its independence 100 years later, and then there was an arms race followed by the Great Antimatter War that just wouldn't come to an end. In 1996, with both planets almost destroyed, we received the news that Earth had developed some kind of super weapon. When we learned what it was already too late. They couldn't win any other way." She fell silent for a moment and then said, "They sent a bomb back in time, making the planet uninhabitable. That's why it's too hot now. It was the only way for them to undo the damage done to Earth." Even though I thought that was crazy, at least if she truly believed this, I really did enjoy listening to her tale. Still, there was one thing that didn't make sense to me, which I just felt I had to point out. "How come you're still alive then?" She sighed. "My parents were important people on Venus. They put me in a capsule, shielded with some kind of radiation, and sent it to Earth. It was the only craft of its kind. Because of that special radiation, it was protected against the alteration to the timeline. The British Empire thought history would play out more or less the same, and that it would remain the sole power on Earth. But since I arrived here, I've come to understand that the small change in color of that speck in the sky had a greater impact on history than anyone could have imagined." I looked at the evening star glimmering in the sky and thought about what it would have been like with forests and jungles on its surface. I thought of going there. Walking through the rainforest on another world triggered a yearning for a freedom that I had never experienced in real life. Such feelings were just unreal for me as Zahira's stories, and my heart ached from both longing and loathing.